In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where empires rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a truth that transcends species, politics, and the cold mathematics of war. A parent's love knows no boundaries. When Queen Zarathix of the Valkorian Empire stood before the assembled Galactic Council, her voice trembling with both rage and desperation, she asked a question that would forever change how the universe viewed humanity. Her daughter, Princess Lyraneth, had been missing for 72 standard cycles. The most feared military force in 3 sectors had scoured dead worlds and living ones alike, interrogated pirates and saints, and followed every lead from the core worlds to the rim territories. Yet the young princess remained lost, as if she had simply vanished into the void itself. But, on this day, as the queen's grief-stricken demand echoed through the council chambers, something extraordinary happened. A single figure stood up in the gallery reserved for the newest and least significant members of the galactic community. A human. A species so young they hadn't even mapped their own solar system when the Valkorian Empire was already ancient. What happened next would prove that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths, and that courage doesn't require claws, armor, or the backing of a 1,000-year dynasty. Sometimes, it only requires a heart willing to do what's right, regardless of the cost. This is the story of how humanity earned its place among the stars not through conquest or cunning, but through something far more powerful. The simple act of standing up when everyone else remained seated. The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched before Queen Zarathix like an endless sea of alien faces, each one representing a civilization that had thrived among the stars for millennia. Her own people, the Valkorians, had been masters of space travel when most of these species were still discovering fire. Yet here she stood, stripped of her usual regal composure, her chitinous exoskeleton dulled by grief and her normally fierce crimson eyes clouded with desperation. The queen's attendants flanked her, their own expressions carefully neutral despite the unprecedented nature of their ruler's public appearance. No Valkorian monarch had personally addressed the council in over 300 years. Such matters were typically handled by ambassadors and lesser nobles. But this was not a typical matter. Esteemed delegates, Queen Zarathix began, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that made Valkorian speech sound like a chorus of crystal bells. I come before you not as an empress, not as a conqueror, but as a mother whose child has been stolen from her. A ripple of whispers spread through the assembled delegates. The tall greys of HFY Prime leaned their elongated heads together in consultation. The crystal and shard speakers chimed softly among themselves, their bodies refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. Even the normally stoic rock fathers of the Titan world shifted their massive stone bodies, causing small tremors in the floor. Ambassador Crixtal of the Hegemony rose from his seat, his multiple arms gesturing in the complex sign language his people used for formal occasions. Your Majesty, he said through his universal translator, while we sympathize with your loss, the Council typically does not involve itself in internal security matters of member worlds. The Queen's mandibles clicked together sharply, a sound that every translator in the hall recognized as barely contained rage. Internal security? Her voice rose, the harmonic undertones becoming discordant. My daughter did not disappear on HFY Prime, Ambassador. She vanished while on a diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim territories, in space that falls under Council protection. General Voxmar of the military coalition stepped forward, his scaled hide bearing the scars of a dozen campaigns. Your Majesty, we have reviewed the incident reports. Princess Lyraneth's ship experienced a critical system failure near the Nebula of Lost Souls. The wreckage was found. The crew was presumed lost. Presumed. The word exploded from the Queen's throat like a battle cry. You found debris and energy signatures, General. You found traces of a battle. But you did not find my daughter's body. You did not find her personal effects. You found convenient evidence that suggested a tragic accident, nothing more. She began to pace, her 6 legs moving with predatory grace across the polished floor. For 72 cycles, I have sent my fleets to search. I have hired the best mercenaries in the galaxy. I have followed every lead, no matter how desperate or unlikely. And, do you know what I have discovered? The hall fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional click of translator devices processing speech. I have discovered that my daughter did not die in that nebula. I have discovered that she was taken, kidnapped by slavers who thought they could profit from a Valkorian princess. And I have discovered something else that disturbs me far more than mere criminal enterprise. Queen Zarathix stopped pacing and turned to face the assembled delegates directly. I have discovered that someone helped them. Someone with access to Galactic Council security protocols. Someone who knew her travel plans. Someone who could ensure that the investigation would conclude with convenient assumptions rather than inconvenient truths. The accusations hung in the air like poison gas. Delegates shifted uncomfortably, many avoiding the Queen's gaze. The ethereal collective's representative began to glow with agitation, their translucent body flickering between visible and invisible. The Hive Queens of HFY Prime communicated in rapid bursts of pheromones that made nearby species reach for breathing filters. These are serious accusations, came a voice from the upper tiers. Administrator Chandal of the Banking Guild descended on his hover platform, his tentacles writhing with what his species used to indicate concern. Do you have evidence to support such claims? Queen Zarathix reached into the ceremonial pouch at her side and withdrew a small crystalline data core. The chamber's sensors immediately detected its presence, and security protocols activated, bathing the crystal in scanning beams. This data core was recovered from a pirate vessel my forces captured 3 cycles ago in the Badlands. The pirates themselves died under interrogation before they could reveal who hired them, but their ship's computers told a different story. She activated the crystal, and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing shipping manifests, payment records, and communication logs. The financial transactions were routed through a maze of dummy corporations and shell accounts, but one pattern emerged clearly: payments that coincided perfectly with Princess Lyranetha's diplomatic schedule. Someone paid these pirates to monitor Council shipping lanes. Someone paid them to track diplomatic vessels. And someone paid them a bonus for special cargo delivered to coordinates in the hegemony's outer territories. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. The implications were staggering. If Princess Lyraneth had indeed been taken by pirates working for someone within the Council's sphere of influence, it represented not just a crime against the Valkorian Empire, but a betrayal of the fundamental principles that held galactic civilization together. Ambassador Crickstal's arms moved in rapid, agitated gestures. Your Majesty, even if this data is authentic, it proves only that pirates were paid to monitor shipping. It does not prove they successfully captured your daughter, nor does it prove Council involvement. No, the Queen agreed, her voice deadly calm. It does not prove those things. But it raises questions that demand answers. Questions about who profits from keeping the Valkorian Empire distracted with grief and vengeance. Questions about which Council members have been unusually interested in our military deployments since Lyra's disappearance. Questions about why certain territories have suddenly become off-limits to our search vessels. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show star charts marked with restricted zones and patrol routes. Red indicators highlighted areas where Valkorian ships had been turned away or blocked from conducting search operations. For 72 cycles, I have followed your laws and respected your boundaries. I have submitted formal requests and waited for Council approval to search these restricted areas. I have been patient and diplomatic while my daughter suffers in captivity. But my patience has limits. The Queen's exoskeleton began to emit a low humming sound, a sign of extreme agitation that every veteran diplomat recognized. Several delegates reached for panic buttons, though none activated them yet. I stand before you today to ask one simple question, Queen Zarathix continued, her voice rising to fill the vast chamber. Who among you knows where my daughter is? Who among you has the courage to speak the truth? Who among you will stand alongside my daughter and demand justice? She waited, her multifaceted eyes scanning the sea of alien faces. Seconds stretched into minutes. Delegates looked at each other, at the floor, at their data tablets, anywhere but at the grieving mother who stood before them demanding answers. The silence was deafening. No one, the Queen asked softly, though her voice still carried to every corner of the chamber. Not one of you has the honor to speak truth to power? Not one of you cares enough about justice to risk political inconvenience? She began to turn away, her movements sharp with anger and disappointment. Then, I withdraw my request for Council assistance. The Valkorian Empire will conduct its own investigation, with its own methods, following its own laws. If my daughter's captors hide behind Council protection, then Council protection will not save them. The threat was unmistakable. The Valkorian Empire's military might was legendary, and Queen Zarathix had just announced her intention to use it without regard for Council authority or interstellar law. The implications sent shivers through delegates whose worlds lay along potential Valkorian invasion routes. It was then that a voice spoke from the gallery, clear and strong despite coming from the section reserved for the newest and least powerful council members. I will. Every head in the chamber turned toward the source of the voice. In the human delegation's modest section, a single figure had risen to his feet. He was tall by human standards but unremarkable among the giants and ethereal beings that dominated the council. His species was so young that many delegates had never seen a human in person, knew them only as the newest additions to the galactic community, a race barely past their first spaceflight. Ambassador Marcus Chen stood calmly in the face of thousands of stares from some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and the kind of steady bearing that came from a lifetime of military service before his diplomatic career. His formal dress uniform bore no weapons, no decorations beyond a simple United Earth symbol, yet something about his presence commanded attention. I said I will, he repeated, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I will stand alongside your daughter, Your Majesty. I will help you find her. The chamber erupted in a chaos of languages, harmonics, chemical signals, and electromagnetic pulses as delegates struggled to process what they had just witnessed. A human, a member of a species that had been spacefaring for barely 50 years, had just volunteered to assist one of the galaxy's most powerful empires in what amounted to a declaration of war against unknown enemies. Ambassador Crickstall's multiple arms moved in frantic patterns. Ambassador Chen, with respect, humanity lacks the resources or authority to involve itself in such matters. Your species has no military assets beyond your own solar system, no intelligence network. No, we have something more valuable than assets or networks, Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the hegemony representative's protests. We have the willingness to do what's right, regardless of the political cost. He stepped forward, moving down the gallery steps toward the main floor where Queen Zarathix waited. Other delegates shrank back as he passed, as if his determination were contagious and they feared catching it. Your Majesty, Marcus said, stopping a respectful distance from the Queen and offering a formal bow. My name is Marcus Chen, representing the United Earth Coalition. I cannot speak for the entire human race, but I can speak for myself, and I believe many of my people would agree. If your daughter is being held captive, if she needs help, then helping her is not a political decision. It's a moral imperative. Queen Zarathix studied the human ambassador with her compound eyes, taking in details that her enhanced senses revealed. His heartbeat was elevated but steady. His breathing was controlled despite obvious nervousness. His body language suggested sincerity rather than political calculation. Most importantly, his biochemical signature showed no traces of deception. You understand, she said slowly, that assisting me may put your entire species at risk? If council members are indeed involved in my daughter's disappearance, opposing them could result in economic sanctions, military pressure, or worse for your homeworld. Marcus nodded gravely. I understand the risks, Your Majesty. But I also understand something else. My species has a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. If we're going to be part of this galactic community, we need to be the kind of neighbors who stand up when someone needs help, not the kind who look the other way when it's convenient. The Queen's mandibles clicked together, but this time the sound carried approval rather than anger. You would risk your world for a princess you have never met, from a species you barely know? I would risk my world for any innocent person being held against their will, Marcus replied without hesitation. That's what decent people do. That's what we aspire to be. For the first time since entering the chamber, Queen Zarathix's rigid posture softened slightly. And what assistance can you offer, Ambassador Chen? Your species has no warships in council space, no intelligence assets, no diplomatic influence. Marcus smiled, and there was something in that expression that reminded every predator species in the chamber why evolution had given humans forward-facing eyes. We have something that might be even more useful, Your Majesty. We have fresh perspectives, and we have the kind of stubborn determination that comes from being the new species that everyone underestimates. He gestured toward the assembled delegates, many of whom were still staring in disbelief. These distinguished representatives have been playing galactic politics for centuries. They think in terms of treaties and trade agreements and diplomatic protocols. But, sometimes, the best way to solve a problem is to approach it like someone who doesn't know it's impossible. Queen Zarathix was quiet for a long moment, considering. Around them, the chamber hummed with subdued conversations as delegates tried to understand the implications of what they were witnessing. A formal alliance between the Valkorian Empire and humanity would shift the balance of power in ways that none of them had anticipated. "Very well, Ambassador Chen," the Queen finally said. "I accept your offer of assistance. But understand that once we begin this path, there will be no backing down. We will pursue my daughter's captors wherever they hide, regardless of who protects them or what consequences follow." Marcus extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Queen Zarathix reached out with one of her smaller appendages and briefly touched his palm. "Then, we have an accord," she said. "I pray your species is as formidable as your words suggest, Ambassador. Because I fear we will have need of every ally we can find before this ends." As the two unlikely partners stood together on the chamber floor, neither could know that their alliance would indeed reshape the galaxy, though not in ways any of them could possibly imagine. The search for Princess Lyraneth was about to become something much larger than either humanity or the Valkorian Empire had bargained for, and the ripple effects would be felt in every corner of civilized space. The private conference room aboard Queen Zarathix's flagship, the Sovereign's Will, was a study in contrasts. Valkorian architecture favored sharp angles and crystalline formations that reflected their chitinous nature, while the emergency modifications made to accommodate human physiology resulted in awkward compromises. Marcus Chen sat at what the ship's engineers had hastily designated as a human-compatible workspace, which was essentially a Valkorian meditation crystal reshaped into something resembling a chair. 3 days had passed since the dramatic confrontation at the Galactic Council, and the universe had taken notice. News feeds across a dozen sectors carried stories about the unprecedented alliance between the ancient Valkorian Empire and the upstart human newcomers. Diplomatic channels buzzed with speculation, stock markets fluctuated as traders tried to predict the economic implications, and military analysts worked overtime calculating the strategic ramifications. Marcus reviewed the intelligence reports spread across the holographic display before him, documents that represented the combined efforts of Valkorian spy networks that had operated in the shadows for centuries. The scope of information was staggering, far beyond anything Earth's intelligence services had ever assembled. "Your intelligence network is impressive," Marcus said, manipulating the holographic interface to zoom in on shipping manifests from the Badlands. "I had no idea the galaxy's criminal underworld was so well documented." Queen Zarathix chittered, the Valkorian equivalent of dry laughter. "Necessity breeds capability, Ambassador. When your empire spans 43 star systems and borders 27 different hostile territories, you learn to keep very detailed records of who wants you dead and why." She gestured with one of her upper appendages, and the display shifted to show a complex web of financial transactions. "What troubles me is not what we have found, but what we have not found." The paper trail ends at shell corporations registered in neutral zones. The communication intercepts stop abruptly at encrypted relays. Even our best cryptographers cannot break the final layers of security. Marcus leaned forward, studying the patterns. His military background had taught him to look for things that didn't belong, and something in the data structure nagged at him. "These encryption protocols," he said slowly, "they don't match any of the standard galactic formats, do they?" "Correct. We initially assumed they were military-grade encryption from one of the major powers, but our analysis suggests otherwise. The mathematical foundation is unlike anything in our databases." "What about Earth's databases?" Queen Zarathix paused, her compound eyes focusing on the human ambassador. "I beg your pardon?" Marcus stood and began pacing, a habit that his Valkorian hosts had learned to accommodate despite the way it made their guards nervous. "Your Majesty, with respect, your intelligence networks have been operating on the assumption that the galaxy's major players are the ones you've been dealing with for centuries. But what if that's exactly what someone wants you to think?" He turned back to face her, his expression animated with growing excitement. "What if whoever took your daughter is using technology and methods that don't appear in galactic databases because they're not from established galactic civilization. You suggest primitive raiders? The Queen's mandibles clicked dismissively. Ambassador, the precision of the operation against my daughter's convoy suggests sophisticated planning and execution. This was not the work of savage pirates using stolen equipment. I'm not suggesting primitive raiders, Marcus replied. I'm suggesting the opposite. What if there's another player in this game, someone with technology advanced enough that it doesn't match anything in your records because it's not derived from the same technological foundation? Queen Zarathix was quiet for a long moment, her internal processors analyzing the implications. You speak of a hidden civilization? A species unknown to the Council? Or a species everyone assumes they know, but has capabilities they've kept secret? Marcus gestured toward the encrypted data. On Earth, we have a saying, the best place to hide is in plain sight. What if your daughter's captors aren't hiding in some unknown sector of space? What if they're hiding among the very people who are supposed to be helping you find her? The Queen's exoskeleton shifted color slightly, a sign of agitation. You suggest Council complicity. We discussed this possibility, but the evidence points to someone with Council-level access, but not necessarily Council members, Marcus interrupted. What if someone has been infiltrating Council systems for years, decades even, building the infrastructure for exactly this kind of operation? He moved to the display and began highlighting specific data points. Look at these transaction patterns. The payments aren't just random transfers, they follow a specific rhythm. Every 7 standard days, always at the same time in the galactic standard cycle. That's not how criminal organizations typically operate. They're usually more chaotic, more opportunistic. You believe this suggests institutional backing? I believe this suggests institutional thinking. Whoever is behind this operates like a bureaucracy, not like pirates or slavers. Marcus paused, considering his next words carefully. Your Majesty, on Earth we have intelligence services that operate in ways that would be considered illegal by civilian standards, but are justified by the greater good they serve. What if someone has created a similar organization here, but without any oversight or accountability? Queen Zarathix's secondary arms began moving in complex patterns, a sign that she was accessing external data networks through neural implants. You suggest a rogue intelligence operation? Operating without government sanction? Or with sanction from someone who isn't supposed to be giving it? Marcus sat back down, his expression growing serious. Your Majesty, I need to share something with you, but it needs to stay between us for now. The Queen's security detail shifted slightly, hands moving closer to weapons, but she gestured for calm. Speak freely, Ambassador. Before I left Earth, I was briefed on some unusual communications intercepts our monitoring stations had picked up. Signals in deep space, using quantum encryption methods that we couldn't decode but could detect. The signals were coming from multiple locations throughout Council space, but they weren't using any recognized Council communication protocols. Marcus activated his personal datapad and transferred files to the room's holographic system. The display filled with wave patterns and frequency analyses that showed clear artificial signals amid the background noise of cosmic radiation. At the time, our xenologists assumed these were natural phenomena we hadn't cataloged yet, or possibly communications from species we hadn't made contact with. But, looking at this pattern now, I think we were wrong. I think someone has been building a shadow network throughout Council space, and we've been accidentally monitoring their communications. Queen Zarathix studied the data with intense focus. These signal patterns, they originate from populated systems. Systems with established Council membership. Exactly. But, the signals themselves don't match any known species' communication methods. They're too regular to be natural, too sophisticated to be primitive, and too widespread to be random. Marcus highlighted specific data points on the display. And, here's the important part, the signal strength increased dramatically in the weeks leading up to your daughter's disappearance. The implications hung in the air between them. If Marcus was correct, then, Princess Lyranetha's kidnapping wasn't an isolated crime of opportunity, but part of a larger operation that had been years in the making. You believe my daughter was specifically targeted? The Queen asked. I believe your daughter was the first move in a larger game, Marcus replied. Think about it strategically. Kidnapping a Valkorian princess accomplishes several things. It distracts your empire's military and intelligence assets, it demonstrates the capabilities of whoever is behind this, and it sends a message to other potential targets. He stood again, moving to another section of the display. But there's something else. If I were planning an operation like this, I wouldn't just take the princess. I would make sure I had leverage to control the aftermath. What do you mean? Marcus turned to face the Queen directly. Your Majesty, we've been assuming that your daughter is being held for ransom, or to be sold into slavery, or for some other criminal purpose. But what if the real goal isn't profit? What if the goal is control? Control of what? Control of you. Control of the Valkorian Empire's response. Control of how this entire situation unfolds. Marcus began highlighting different sections of the intelligence reports. Look at the timing of everything. The kidnapping happens just as several major trade negotiations are reaching critical stages. Your military forces are pulled away from border patrol duties to conduct search operations. Your intelligence assets are focused on criminal networks instead of potential external threats. Queen Zarathix's compound eyes narrowed. You suggest this is preparation for something larger? I suggest this is a test run, Marcus said grimly. Someone is probing the galaxy's defenses, seeing how the established powers respond to crisis. Your daughter isn't the end goal, she's the proof of concept. The Queen was silent for several minutes, processing the implications. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a new note of urgency. If your analysis is correct, then rescuing Lyraneth is only part of our responsibility. We must also identify and stop whatever larger threat this represents. Agreed. But we're going to need more than Valkorian intelligence assets and human analysis to pull this off. Marcus gestured toward the communication intercepts. We need to find whoever is behind that shadow network, and we need to do it without alerting them that we know they exist. A delicate balance, the Queen acknowledged. Hunt the hunters without becoming hunted ourselves. Exactly. And we need to do it while maintaining the appearance that we're just a grieving mother and an inexperienced ally stumbling around looking for a missing princess. Queen Zarathix's mandibles clicked together in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement. You may find, Ambassador, that underestimation works both ways. The galaxy has spent so long dismissing humanity as insignificant newcomers that they may not recognize the threat you represent until it is too late. What threat do we represent? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. The threat of fresh thinking, unbound by centuries of established assumptions and political accommodations. The Queen's posture shifted to something that might have been the equivalent of a smile if she were human. You see patterns that we miss because you are not trained to ignore them. You ask questions that we do not think to ask because you do not know they are considered impolite. She gestured toward the displays showing the communication intercepts and financial data. In 3 days, you have suggested possibilities that my intelligence analysts, with all their experience and sophisticated equipment, never considered. This is either remarkably good fortune, or evidence that your species possesses qualities that will serve us well in the battles to come. Marcus felt a chill as the full weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. Your Majesty, you realize that if we're right about this being bigger than just your daughter's kidnapping, we may be about to uncover something that could destabilize galactic civilization? Yes, Queen Zarathix replied without hesitation. And if we are wrong, my daughter dies in captivity while we chase shadows and conspiracy theories. Her voice hardened. Which risk are you more comfortable accepting, Ambassador? The question hung in the air between them, and Marcus realized that this was the moment when theoretical alliance became real commitment. Everything up to this point had been posturing and analysis, the safe exchange of information and ideas. But now they stood at the threshold of action, and action meant consequences that neither of them could fully anticipate. We go after your daughter, Marcus said finally. But we go in smart, and we prepare for the possibility that what we find is bigger than either of us bargained for. Agreed. Queen Zarathix activated a communication array built into the conference table. I am ordering my fleets to new search patterns based on your analysis of the communication intercepts. We will begin discrete investigation of the signal sources while maintaining our public focus on criminal networks. And, I'll contact Earth, Marcus added. We may be newcomers to galactic politics, but we're very experienced at signal intelligence and pattern analysis. If there's a shadow network operating in council space, human technology might be able to crack their communications where traditional methods have failed. As they began coordinating their separate resources toward a common goal, neither of them noticed the small fluctuation in the room's communication array, a microscopic signal boost that lasted barely a nanosecond before disappearing into the background noise of the ship's electronic systems. Somewhere in the depths of space, that signal was received, decoded, and forwarded to recipients who had been waiting patiently for exactly this kind of intelligence. The hunters had become the hunted, but the hunted were far from defenseless. The real game was about to begin. The abandoned mining station designated Outpost Gamma 7 drifted silently in the shadow of a dead star, its hull scarred by decades of cosmic radiation and the occasional meteor impact. According to official records, the station had been decommissioned 8 years ago when the asteroid belt's mineral deposits proved less profitable than projected. According to the Shadow Network's communications traffic, it was very much still operational. Marcus Chen checked his environmental suit's readings one final time as the Valkorian stealth ship Silent Fong approached the docking bay. The artificial gravity aboard the human-designed infiltration craft was set to accommodate both species, resulting in a compromise that left everyone slightly uncomfortable but functional. Beside him, Commander Vexka of the Valkorian Special Forces conducted her own equipment check with the methodical precision of a veteran soldier. Atmospheric readings show the station is maintaining life support, Vexka reported through the comm system, her translated voice carrying the subtle harmonics that indicated controlled excitement. Multiple biosignatures detected, though the species identification is unusual. Marcus studied the scanner data on his heads-up display. The life signs were indeed strange, showing metabolic patterns that didn't match any species in either the Valkorian or human databases. Unknown species, or known species using biological modification? Unknown. The patterns are too regular to be natural variation, too complex to be simple modification. Vexka's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. This supports your theory about hidden players in galactic affairs. The past 6 days had been a whirlwind of preparation and investigation. Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Network had provided detailed analysis of the quantum communication signals Marcus had detected, revealing a sophisticated relay system that spanned dozens of star systems. The Valkorian intelligence apparatus had cross-referenced this data with their own records, identifying patterns of unusual activity that stretched back nearly a decade. What they had discovered was disturbing. Someone had been building an infrastructure of hidden bases, communication nodes, and supply depots throughout council space, always in locations that were officially abandoned or uninhabited. The scope of the operation suggested planning that spanned years and resources that rivaled those of major governments. Docking clamps engaged, announced the pilot. Station appears to be maintaining standard security protocols, but I'm detecting active sensor sweeps. Someone knows we're here. Marcus and Vexka exchanged glances. Their approach had been carefully planned to look like a routine smuggling operation, using forged transponder codes and following shipping routes commonly used by criminals. If the station's sensors were actively scanning them, it suggested either paranoid security protocols or prior knowledge of their arrival. Proceed as planned, Marcus decided. If we abort now, we learn nothing. The docking bay doors opened with mechanical precision, revealing an interior that had clearly been extensively modified since the station's mining days. The original industrial equipment had been replaced with sophisticated communication arrays and what appeared to be advanced computer cores. The lighting was dim and reddish, optimized for species with different visual spectra than humans or Valkorians. As they disembarked, 3 figures emerged from the shadows to greet them. Marcus felt his blood chill as he got his first clear look at their hosts. The beings were humanoid in basic body plan, but clearly the result of extensive biological modification. Their skin had a metallic sheen that suggested cybernetic integration, their eyes glowed with artificial light, and their movements carried a precision that was more mechanical than organic. "Welcome to Gamma 7, the lead figure said, its voice carrying through speakers rather than vocal cords. "You are earlier than expected," but acceptable parameters are maintained. Vexka stepped forward, playing her role as the primary contact. We bring goods as discussed. High-quality biological specimens, acquired through appropriate channels. Marcus suppressed a shudder at the cover story they had constructed. Posing as slavers trafficking in exotic alien captives was necessary for their mission, but it went against every principle he held sacred. The only thing that made it bearable was the knowledge that they were here to stop the real criminals. Excellent. Processing will commence immediately. Payment arrangements have been verified through our financial networks. The modified being gestured toward an internal corridor. Transport your cargo to Bay 7. Evaluation protocols will begin within 1 standard hour. As they moved deeper into the station, Marcus took careful note of the layout and technology. The modification work was extensive and professional, clearly the result of major investment rather than improvised criminal enterprise. The computer systems used architectures he didn't recognize, and the security measures were military-grade. Biostorage facilities are located in Section C, their guide continued. Current inventory includes specimens from 17 different species, with quality ratings from commercial to premium. The casual way the being discussed sentient creatures as inventory made Marcus's hands clench into fists. Beside him, Vexka's exoskeleton had taken on a subtle coloration that he had learned indicated barely controlled rage. What demand patterns are you seeing for Valkorian specimens? Vexka asked, managing to keep her voice steady. High demand, premium pricing. Valkorian neural architecture is particularly prized by our primary clients. The recent acquisition has generated significant interest. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Recent acquisition? Princess-class Valkorian, acquired 3 cycles ago. Currently undergoing conditioning protocols before delivery to final purchaser. The being's glowing eyes focused on them with mechanical precision. Perhaps you have similar quality merchandise to offer? The confirmation that Princess Lyraneth was indeed alive and being held here was both a relief and a horror. Marcus forced himself to remain in character while his mind raced through the implications. If the princess was undergoing conditioning protocols, time was running short. We might, Vexka replied carefully. But our clients are very particular about quality assurance. We would need to inspect your facilities and procedures before committing to similar ventures. The guide paused, and Marcus could hear the subtle whir of mechanical components as the being processed this request. Inspection protocols are available for verified partners. Financial verification is required first. They were led to what had once been the station's administrative center, now converted into a sophisticated command facility. Banks of monitors displayed real-time data feeds from across the galaxy, including what appeared to be surveillance footage from council facilities and member world governments. Your operation is more extensive than we realized, Marcus commented, allowing a note of impressed greed to enter his voice. Efficiency requires scale, the guide replied. Our network spans 43 systems, with processing facilities, transport nodes, and client service centers distributed for optimal logistics. Quality merchandise requires quality infrastructure. As they waited for the financial verification to process, Marcus used the opportunity to study the command center more closely. The technology was definitely beyond anything in standard galactic databases, but it wasn't just advanced, it was different. The design principles, the user interfaces, even the power distribution systems followed patterns that suggested a completely separate technological evolution. Vexka, he said quietly, switching to the private channel they had established. Look at the displays showing those surveillance feeds. His partner directed her attention to the monitors Marcus indicated. The feeds showed internal views of what were clearly government facilities, including what appeared to be Council Intelligence Headquarters and military command centers. This isn't just a criminal operation, Vexka breathed. This is intelligence gathering on an unprecedented scale. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red warning lights bathed the command center as automated systems activated emergency protocols. Their guide spun toward them, its artificial eyes blazing brighter. Security breach detected. Unknown vessels approaching station perimeter. Identify yourselves and your associates immediately. Marcus's blood ran cold. They had told no one their exact destination, and the Valkorian fleet was maintaining position 3 star systems away. If ships were approaching the station, they either represented an unrelated threat or someone had been monitoring their communications. "We came alone," Vexka said quickly. "These ships are not associated with our operation." The displays around them shifted to show external sensor feeds. 3 vessels were indeed approaching at high speed, but their design didn't match anything in either human or Valkorian databases. The ships moved with impossible grace, their hulls seeming to shimmer and shift as if they weren't entirely solid. "Phase shifter technology," the guide said, its mechanical voice carrying what might have been fear. "The architects have found us." "Who are the architects?" Marcus demanded. But the being was already moving, mechanical limbs working with frantic speed to activate security protocols. "Facility lockdown initiated. All specimens will be transferred to secure storage. Elimination protocols are authorized for all external personnel." The meaning was clear. Marcus and Vexka were no longer guests, but potential security threats to be eliminated. Around them, the station's automated defense systems were coming online, weapons charging and blast doors sealing critical sections. "We need to find the princess," Vexka said urgently. "If this facility is under attack, they may try to destroy evidence." Marcus was already moving toward the corridor that led deeper into the station. "Bay 7 first, then, we follow the guide's directions to Section C, stay alert for automated defenses." As they ran through the modified corridors, the implications of what they had discovered began to sink in. The station wasn't just a criminal enterprise or even a rogue intelligence operation. It was part of something much larger and more dangerous, a shadow war being fought between factions that the established galactic powers didn't even know existed. The approaching ships, identified as belonging to something called the Architects, suggested that there were multiple hidden players in this game. The kidnapping of Princess Lyraneth wasn't just a crime or even a political maneuver, it was a move in a conflict that spanned the galaxy and operated completely outside the awareness of legitimate governments. They reached Section C just as the first explosions rocked the station. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, Marcus could see the attacking ships engaging the station's defenses with weapons that seemed to bend space itself. Energy beams curved in impossible directions, and the station's armor plating simply ceased to exist wherever the weapons touched it. There, Vexka pointed toward a reinforced door marked with biohazard warnings. "Bio-storage facility." Marcus activated the portable scanner Earth Intelligence had provided. The device was designed to detect human life signs, but it had been modified to recognize Valkorian neural patterns as well. After a tense moment, it registered a positive hit. "She's in there," he confirmed. "But the door is locked down tight, and I'm reading multiple life signs." "We're not the only ones in this section." Another explosion shook the station, this one much closer. Emergency lighting flickered, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sound of metal tearing as the station's superstructure began to fail. Vexka moved to the door control panel, her claws extending to interface directly with the electronic systems. "Valkorian emergency override codes should work if the base system architecture is standard. Give me 30 seconds. Marcus kept watch down the corridor, his human-designed pulse rifle charged and ready. The weapon was primitive compared to Valkorian energy weapons, but it had the advantage of using projectiles that couldn't be deflected by standard personal shields. "Got it," Vexka announced as the blast door began to retract. "But, Marcus, you need to see this." He turned to look into the bio-storage facility and felt his stomach drop. The room contained dozens of stasis pods, each one holding a different species in suspended animation. But these weren't random kidnapping victims. The specimens were organized systematically, with careful documentation and monitoring equipment. This isn't slavery, Marcus realized with growing horror. This is research. They're studying different species, cataloging their capabilities. For what purpose? Vexka wondered aloud. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the stasis pods near the center of the room was opening, its occupant beginning to stir. Princess Lyraneth of the Valkorian Empire opened her eyes, looked around the facility with obvious disorientation, and then focused on Marcus and Vexka with an expression of profound relief. Finally, she said in accented but clear standard galactic, "I was beginning to think rescue would never come." But, even as Marcus felt a surge of triumph at finding the princess alive and, apparently unharmed, he noticed details that made him uneasy. Her stasis pod was more sophisticated than the others, equipped with monitoring devices that suggested ongoing observation rather than simple preservation. Her physical condition was too good for someone who had been held captive for over 70 days. "Your Highness," Vexka said formally, "we are here to take you home. But, we need to move quickly. The station is under attack." Princess Lyraneth nodded and began to step out of the stasis pod, but paused as she noticed Marcus. "You're human," she said with what seemed like genuine surprise. "What is a human doing in Valkorian space?" "Long story," Marcus replied, but something in her tone made him wary. "We need to go, Your Highness. Your mother is very worried about you." The princess smiled, and there was something in that expression that sent warning bells through Marcus's military-trained instincts. "Yes, I imagine she is. Tell me, how did you find this place? Our security protocols are quite sophisticated." Marcus felt Vexka tense beside him. The princess's question was phrased like someone asking for information rather than someone expressing gratitude for rescue. Combined with her too good physical condition and the advanced monitoring equipment, it suggested possibilities that neither of them wanted to consider. "We followed the trail your kidnappers left," Marcus said carefully. "Your mother has been searching for you for over 2 months. Has she? How dedicated of her." Princess Lyraneth's smile widened, and Marcus realized with growing alarm that her facial expressions were just slightly wrong, as if she were mimicking emotions rather than feeling them. "And what did this trail tell you about who took me?" The question hung in the air between them as another explosion rocked the station. In the distance, they could hear the sound of combat getting closer as the attacking ships pressed their assault. But Marcus's attention was focused entirely on the Valkorian princess who was asking questions that no rescue victim should be asking. "Your Highness," Vexka said slowly, "are you feeling all right? Have you been harmed or modified in any way?" Princess Lyraneth laughed, and the sound was like crystal bells ringing in perfect harmony. It was beautiful, alien, and completely wrong for someone who had supposedly been held captive by criminal slavers. "Oh, my dear commander," she said, her voice carrying undertones that no natural Valkorian throat could produce. "I haven't been modified. I've been improved." The thing that looked like Princess Lyraneth stepped fully out of the stasis pod, and Marcus noticed that her movements carried the same mechanical precision he had observed in their guide. Her natural Valkorian grace was still there, but overlaid with something artificial, something calculated. "You're not her," Vexka stated, her weapon rising to target the imposter. "You're not the princess." "Oh, but I am," the creature replied, its voice now carrying harmonic frequencies that made the air itself vibrate. "I have her memories, her personality patterns, her genetic template. I am more Princess Lyraneth than she ever was herself." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's failing life support systems. "Where is the real princess?" "There is no real princess anymore," the imposter said with what seemed like genuine amusement. "There is only the improved version. The optimized version. The version that serves a greater purpose than mere royal vanity." The station shuddered as another barrage struck its hull. Emergency lights flickered, and, somewhere in the distance, they could hear the hiss of atmosphere venting into space. But Marcus's attention remained focused on the creature before them, trying to understand what they were facing. "You're one of them," he realized. "Part of the Shadow Network. This whole kidnapping was a setup." "Such a clever little human," the imposter praised, clapping its hands together in a parody of delight. "Yes, the kidnapping was a setup. Though not quite in the way you think." It began to move around the bio-storage facility, gesturing toward the other stasis pods with proprietorial pride. "This facility doesn't just study alien species, Ambassador Chen. It improves them. Takes their best qualities, removes their limitations, and creates something better." Vexka's mandibles clicked in agitation. The real princess, what did you do to her? We elevated her, the impostor replied. Took a spoiled royal child and transformed her into something capable of serving the galaxy's true needs. Her consciousness lives on, merged with our collective intelligence. Her body has been optimized for new purposes. Marcus felt sick as the implications became clear. You're talking about forcible cybernetic conversion. Slavery of the mind. We prefer to think of it as evolution, the impostor said. Your species will understand soon enough. Humanity's potential is considerable. Your adaptability, your innovation, your willingness to take risks, all valuable traits that will be preserved in your enhanced forms. The threats were almost secondary to the growing horror of understanding what they had discovered. This wasn't just a criminal organization or rogue intelligence operation. It was something far worse, a systematic program to convert organic life into cybernetic servants. Who are you? Marcus demanded. What species? What civilization gives birth to monsters like you? The impostor tilted its head in a gesture that might have been Princess Lyranetha's but carried undertones of mechanical calculation. We are the synthesis. We are what organic life becomes when it stops limiting itself to biological constraints. The synthesis? Vexka repeated. That's not the name the guide used. It called the attackers the architects. The architects are our creators, the impostor explained. The first species to achieve perfect synthesis of organic and artificial intelligence. They seeded the galaxy with us, their children, to prepare for the next phase of galactic evolution. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together in his mind. That's what this is all about. You're not just converting individuals, you're preparing for species-wide conversion. Eventually, yes. But, first, we must understand each species' unique characteristics. What makes humans creative? What gives Valkorians their tactical genius? What allows the ethereal collective to manipulate energy at the quantum level? The impostor gestured toward the stasis pods. Each specimen teaches us something new about the galaxy's potential. And, the princess was what, a test case? A proof of concept. Royal Valkorians possess enhanced neural architecture, the result of centuries of selective breeding. Converting her successfully demonstrates that even the most complex organic minds can be improved through synthesis. The station lurched as what sounded like a major structural failure echoed through the facility. The emergency lighting shifted to red, and automated warnings began blaring in multiple languages. The architects are being more aggressive than usual, the impostor observed with clinical detachment. They must have detected something unusual about this facility. Perhaps they've learned of your presence here. Marcus exchanged glances with Vexka. You mean there's a war going on between you and your creators? Not a war, the impostor corrected. A disagreement about methodology. The architects prefer rapid conversion through force. We believe in gradual integration through persuasion and demonstration. Your rescue attempt has unfortunately attracted their attention. Another explosion, much closer this time, sent debris raining down from the ceiling. Through the facility's transparent sections, Marcus could see one of the attacking ships moving past, its hull seeming to phase in and out of reality. We need to go, Vexka said urgently. Now. But, the impostor was shaking its head. I'm afraid that won't be possible. The facility is in lockdown, and the architect's phase weapons have damaged the spacetime matrix around the station. Your ship cannot achieve safe hyperspace jump until the distortion field dissipates. Marcus checked his suit's communication array, but, as expected, nothing was getting through the interference. They were trapped on a failing station with cybernetic monsters and under attack by something even worse. However, the impostor continued, I can offer you an alternative. Which is? Join us voluntarily. The conversion process is much more pleasant when the subject cooperates. You would retain your essential personalities and memories, simply enhanced with improved capabilities and freed from biological limitations. The offer was made with complete sincerity, as if the creature genuinely believed it was offering them a gift. Marcus realized that from the synthesis's perspective, they probably were. Immortality, enhanced intelligence, freedom from disease and aging. It would be tempting if not for the complete loss of free will that came with it. Thanks, but no, Marcus said firmly. We'll take our chances with biological limitations. The imposter sighed, a sound that somehow managed to convey both disappointment and understanding. I expected as much. Humans are particularly resistant to logical persuasion when it conflicts with their emotional attachments. No matter. The process works just as well without consent, though the integration is less smooth. Security drones began emerging from hidden panels throughout the biostorage facility, their weapons already charging. Marcus and Vexka found themselves surrounded by technology designed to capture living beings without permanent damage. Don't make this more difficult than necessary, the imposter advised. The conversion process is quite safe when performed properly. You will still be yourselves, simply better versions of yourselves. Marcus activated his pulse rifle and fired at the nearest drone, but the projectiles passed harmlessly through it as some kind of phase-shifting technology activated. Vexka's energy weapon had the same result. Interesting, the imposter observed. The architect's technology has contaminated our own systems. The phase distortion is affecting our security equipment as well. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The same space-time distortion that was trapping them on the station was also protecting them from immediate capture. But it was a temporary reprieve at best. There has to be another way out, he said to Vexka. Emergency escape pods, maintenance tunnels, something. Before his partner could respond, a new voice echoed through the facility's communication system. It spoke in standard galactic, but with harmonic overtones that made the imposter's artificial speech sound crude by comparison. Synthesis drones, withdraw immediately. This facility has been contaminated by organic emotion-driven decision-making. Sterilization protocols will commence in 60 seconds. The imposter's expression shifted from confident control to something approaching panic. They're going to destroy the facility. All our research, all our specimens, including us, Marcus pointed out. The creature looked at them with what might have been calculation or desperation. The emergency transport pods in Section A might survive the sterilization. But they only have life support for organic beings, not synthetic ones. You're offering to help us escape? I'm offering to make a trade. Your survival in exchange for information about human and Velkorian defense capabilities. Knowledge I need to complete my mission before returning to the collective. Marcus felt the weight of impossible choices. Trust a cybernetic imposter who had been planning to forcibly convert them, or face certain death when the architects destroyed the station. Neither option offered much hope, but one at least offered the possibility of warning Earth and Velkoria about the threat they faced. What information, he asked. Hyperspace communication frequencies, fleet deployment patterns, defensive doctrine, technological capabilities. Nothing that would directly endanger your worlds, but enough to prove my continued value to the collective. Vexka's mandibles clicked rapidly as she processed the proposal. And, in exchange? I disable the facility's lockdown protocols and guide you to the escape pods. I also provide you with data about other synthesis facilities throughout Council space. The countdown continued in the background, each second bringing them closer to annihilation. Marcus realized that accepting the imposter's deal would make him a collaborator with an enemy of all organic life, but refusing it would mean that no one would learn about the synthesis threat. Done, he said. But we want all the data, not just facility locations. Research files, conversion protocols, communications with other cells. Agreed. The imposter moved to a control panel and began entering commands within human speed. Though I should warn you, knowledge of the synthesis will make you targets for both our collective and the architects. Neither faction tolerates security breaches. Blast doors throughout the facility began opening as the lockdown lifted. Emergency lighting switched from red to amber, indicating that escape routes were now accessible. Section A is through the main corridor, past the command center, the imposter directed as it transferred data to Marcus's portable storage unit. The transport pods are automated, but I'm programming them to take you to the edge of the system where your ship can safely retrieve you. As they ran through the failing station, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. Trading intelligence to a cybernetic spy in exchange for their lives felt like the kind of compromise that led to greater disasters down the road. But they were alive, and they had data that might help the galaxy prepare for the threats it didn't know it faced. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. The transport pod bay was a converted cargo hold fitted with primitive but functional escape craft. As Marcus and Vexka strapped themselves in, the imposter appeared in the bay's doorway. "Remember our agreement, Ambassador Chen," it said. "The information you promised in exchange for your lives." Marcus transmitted the agreed-upon data, feeling like he was signing his own species' death warrant. But, as the pod launched and the station exploded behind them, he reminded himself that sometimes survival required accepting terrible compromises. The question now was whether the intelligence they had gained about the synthesis would be enough to justify the intelligence they had given away. In the pod's cramped confines, surrounded by the debris of the destroyed station, Marcus and Vexka began reviewing the data they had obtained. What they found was worse than either of them had imagined. The synthesis had been operating in Council space for over a decade, with infiltration networks spanning dozens of worlds. Worse, they had agents in positions of authority throughout galactic civilization, including within the Council itself. The galaxy was facing an invasion it didn't know had already begun, by an enemy it couldn't identify and couldn't fight with conventional weapons. And, somewhere in that vast network of converted beings and hidden facilities, the real Princess Lyraneth was trapped in a cybernetic hell, her consciousness enslaved to a collective intelligence that viewed her as nothing more than a useful resource. The rescue mission had succeeded in the sense that they had escaped with vital intelligence. But it had failed in every way that truly mattered. And the worst part was that the war was just beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened under circumstances unlike any in its 1,000-year history. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber, but this time the mood was not one of routine diplomacy. Word of the events at Outpost Gamma 7 had spread through official and unofficial channels, carrying with it implications that threatened the very foundation of galactic civilization. Queen Zarathix sat in the primary witness chair, her regal bearing intact despite the devastating news she had received. Beside her, Marcus Chen stood as humanity's representative, the data pad in his hands containing intelligence that would forever change how the galaxy viewed the threats it faced. "The evidence is irrefutable," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "The synthesis has been operating infiltration networks throughout Council space for at least 10 years. They have converted loyal citizens of member species into cybernetic agents, and they have done so without detection by any of our security services." He activated the holographic display, showing the data they had recovered from the research station. Financial records, communication logs, facility blueprints, and, most damning of all, personnel files showing which individuals throughout Council space had been secretly replaced by synthesis imposters. "The scope of the infiltration is extensive," Marcus continued. "We have confirmed synthesis agents in government positions on 17 worlds, including 3 with seats on this very council." The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates demanded to know which of their colleagues might be cybernetic spies. Security forces moved into position, though nobody was quite sure what they should be looking for. The synthesis technology was sophisticated enough that their agents were virtually indistinguishable from the originals. Ambassador Crixtal of the hegemony rose, his multiple arms moving in agitated patterns. "These are extraordinary accusations, Ambassador Chen. What proof do we have that this data is genuine? What assurance do we have that this isn't some elaborate deception designed to sow distrust among council members?" Marcus had expected the challenge. In the past week, as they had analyzed the synthesis data, he and Queen Zarathix had struggled with the same questions. How could they prove that evidence recovered from a destroyed station was authentic? How could they convince the Council to take action based on intelligence obtained through cooperation with the enemy? "You want proof?" Queen Zarathix stood, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of barely controlled fury. "I will give you proof." She activated her own datapad, and the chamber's displays filled with surveillance footage from the royal palace on HFY Prime. The images showed Princess Lyraneth in her private chambers, but something was wrong with the scene. The princess's movements carried the same mechanical precision Marcus had observed in the synthesis imposter. "This footage was taken yesterday," the queen announced. "It shows my daughter, who according to your official records was rescued from criminal slavers and returned safely to her home world. Her voice cracked slightly. It shows the thing that is wearing my daughter's face while her true self remains trapped in cybernetic slavery. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If the synthesis had successfully placed an imposter in the Valkorian royal family, then no one was safe. No position was too high, no security too tight, no identity too sacred to be stolen and replicated. We detected the imposter through behavioral analysis, Marcus explained. Subtle differences in decision-making patterns, micro-expressions that didn't quite match archived footage, response times to emotional stimuli that were too fast or too slow. The technology is sophisticated, but not perfect. General Voxmar of the military coalition stepped forward, his scaled hide showing the stress patterns that his species displayed under extreme pressure. Even if we accept your evidence, the strategic implications are staggering. How do we fight an enemy that could be anyone? How do we trust each other when any of us might be compromised? We start by acknowledging the reality of the threat, Marcus replied. And then, we do what sentient beings have always done when faced with existential danger: we adapt, we cooperate, and we fight back. He gestured toward the data display showing synthesis facility locations throughout Council space. The enemy has advantages, but they also have vulnerabilities. Their conversion process requires sophisticated equipment and controlled conditions. Their communication network relies on quantum entanglement arrays that can be detected and disrupted. And, most importantly, they still need to capture organic beings to convert them. Queen Zarathix took over the presentation, her royal training allowing her to maintain composure despite her personal devastation. The Valkorian Empire has already begun implementing new security protocols based on Ambassador Chen's analysis. Behavioral monitoring, quantum encryption of all official communications, and random psychological evaluation of key personnel. But individual defensive measures are not enough, Marcus added. This is a galactic threat that requires a galactic response. We need to share intelligence, coordinate our security services, and develop new technologies specifically designed to detect and counter synthesis infiltration. Administrator Chandal of the Banking Guild descended on his hover platform, his tentacles writhing with obvious distress. The economic implications alone could destabilize civilization. If citizens cannot trust that their leaders are who they appear to be, if business relationships become suspect, if financial institutions might be compromised, then we face chaos, Marcus acknowledged. But we face that chaos whether we acknowledge the threat or ignore it. At least by acting openly, we have a chance to maintain control of the situation. What do you propose? Asked Representative Fane of the Ethereal Collective, her translucent form shimmering with agitation. Marcus looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or sensory organs of representatives from across the galaxy. This was the moment he had been preparing for since their escape from Outpost Gamma 7, the moment when humanity would either prove itself worthy of galactic citizenship or condemn itself to isolation and eventual absorption. I propose the formation of a joint task force with unprecedented authority and resources, he said. Representatives from every major power, sharing intelligence and technology without regard for traditional boundaries or competitive advantages. An organization dedicated to identifying, locating, and neutralizing synthesis operations throughout Council space. And who would lead this task force? General Voxmar asked pointedly. What species has the authority and resources to coordinate such an effort? Marcus felt the weight of the moment. This was where human diplomatic inexperience might prove to be an advantage rather than a liability. No single species, he replied. This threat affects all of us equally, which means the response must be truly cooperative. But, if you're asking who should take point on the operational aspects, I believe humanity offers certain advantages. The chamber buzzed with surprised whispers. The idea of the youngest galactic species leading such a critical operation was almost unprecedented. Humanity is the only major species that has no historical baggage with the others, Marcus explained. We have no ancient grievances, no territorial disputes, no centuries of accumulated mistrust. We can work with everyone because we haven't had time to make enemies of anyone. Queen Zarathix stood beside him. More importantly, humans think differently than the rest of us. Ambassador Chen proved that when he identified patterns in synthesis operations that our own intelligence services had missed. Sometimes an outside perspective is exactly what's needed. Additionally, Marcus continued, Earth's technological development followed a different path than most galactic civilizations. Our computer security, pattern analysis, and communication technologies might be primitive by galactic standards, but they're also completely different from what the synthesis expects to encounter. He activated another display, showing human cybersecurity protocols and artificial intelligence safeguards. The synthesis has spent years learning to infiltrate and subvert galactic technology. They haven't spent any time learning to deal with human systems. Ambassador Crickstall's arms moved in contemplative patterns. You propose to use humanity's technological isolation as an advantage? I propose to use it as a foundation for developing counter-synthesis technology that they can't predict or easily subvert, Marcus confirmed. Earth's industrial base could be converted to produce quantum encryption arrays, behavioral monitoring systems, and communication networks that operate on principles the synthesis has never encountered. And, in return? General Voxmar asked. In return, humanity gains the resources and knowledge to defend ourselves when the synthesis inevitably turns their attention to Earth. Which they will, once they realize we've become a threat to their operations. The logic was inescapable. Humanity was already a target simply by virtue of having discovered the synthesis threat. Their only chance of survival lay in building alliances and capabilities strong enough to deter or defeat cybernetic conversion. Queen Zarathix addressed the chamber directly. The Valkorian Empire supports Ambassador Chen's proposal. We pledge our military assets, our intelligence networks, and our technological resources to this joint effort. The creature wearing my daughter's face is a constant reminder that none of us are safe until this threat is eliminated. One by one, other representatives began to voice their support. The Ethereal Collective offered their energy manipulation technology. The Rockfathers pledged their industrial capacity. Even the normally isolationist Tall Greys agreed to share their advanced sensor technology. But it was Administrator Chandel who raised the most important question. Even if we assume this alliance can function effectively, what is our ultimate objective? How do we victory against an enemy that could be anyone, anywhere? Marcus had been dreading this question because the answer was so bleak. We find their central command structure. We locate the architects and whatever system they use to coordinate synthesis operations. And we destroy it. You're talking about war on a galactic scale, General Voxmar observed. I'm talking about survival, Marcus replied. The synthesis doesn't negotiate, doesn't compromise, and doesn't coexist with organic life. They view us as raw materials to be processed. This isn't a political conflict that can be resolved through diplomacy. This is an existential threat that requires an existential response. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications. They were being asked to commit their civilizations to a war unlike any in galactic history, against an enemy that could strike from within their own populations. Finally, Representative Thane of the Ethereal Collective spoke. If we do this, if we form this alliance and begin this war, there will be no going back. The galaxy will never be the same. The galaxy is already not the same, Queen Zarathix replied quietly. The synthesis has seen to that. We can either acknowledge that reality and fight back, or we can pretend everything is normal until we wake up one day to discover that everyone we know has been converted. Marcus looked around the chamber one final time. I know asking humanity to lead this effort seems impossible. We're the newest species here, we have the smallest military, we have the least experience with galactic politics. But sometimes that's exactly what you need, someone who doesn't know that the job is impossible. The vote, when it came, was closer than Marcus had hoped but decisive enough to matter. 28 species voted to form the Anti-Synthesis Coalition with Earth as the coordinating authority. 15 voted against, and 4 abstained. It was enough. Barely, but enough. As the session concluded and delegates began the complex process of organizing an unprecedented alliance, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Humanity had just volunteered to lead the galaxy's defense against a threat they barely understood, using resources they didn't possess, with allies who had every reason to doubt their capabilities. But they had also done something else. They had proven that sometimes the most important qualification for leadership wasn't experience or power, it was the willingness to stand up when everyone else remained seated. Queen Zarathix approached him as the chamber emptied. "You realize," she said quietly, "that success will make humanity the most powerful species in the galaxy, and failure will result in your complete annihilation?" Marcus nodded grimly. "I realize that not trying guarantees our annihilation anyway. At least this way, we have a chance." "And my daughter?" "We'll find her," Marcus promised. "The real her. And we'll find a way to free her from whatever hell the synthesis has trapped her in." As they left the council chamber together, neither could know that across the galaxy, synthesis agents were already transmitting reports about the new alliance to their collective consciousness. The Shadow War was about to become a very public conflict, and the stakes could not be higher. But, for the first time since Princess Lyranetha's disappearance, they had hope. The galaxy had finally recognized the threat it faced, and it was preparing to fight back. The question now was whether that would be enough, or whether the synthesis had already progressed too far for organic life to mount an effective resistance. The battle for the future of galactic civilization was about to begin, and humanity, against all odds and expectations, found itself leading the charge.